Do you want to introduce us today?
Oh my gosh, I get to introduce us?
Yeah.
Hi, welcome. This is the Boy, Girl, Mom, and Dad podcast, BGMAD podcast.
Boy, girl, mom and dad here for the good times and the bad. Gender norms and stereotypes to making sure that the butts are wet. Boy, girl, mom and dad want grown-up time, you're going mad. It's a trip, but we'll guide you through with tips and tricks for boys and girls too.
This is my lovely wife,
Lauren?
Lauren. See how I let you introduce yourself? That was good.
Yeah.
She hasn't let me the last 4 episodes, so that's significant. My name's Nick. I'm the dad part of Boy, Girl, Mom, and Dad.
Yeah, and today we have our third and fourth ever guests for episode 37, Your Kids and Their Bodies, Body Safety and Body Image. We have Kayla J.W. Marnach and Kami Blease. All right, Kayla, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, and I really appreciate you allowing me to share with your audience on the books that I've written. I'm an author, speaker, and teacher, and I've written 4 children's books. I work with therapists, and each of the books are for children 3 to 8, and I just feel it's important for children to know about their body. And in the books, there's also a portion for the adult so that they can start the conversation with comfort and ease. My goal is to empower children and educate adults.
Yay, thanks for being here, Kayla.
You
That
bet.
is a bar-setting introduction right there,
Yeah.
Cami.
Come on, Kami.
I'm not prepared for the same level of introduction at all. I have a lot less impressive stats behind my name. Hi, my name is Kami. I'm a body neutral personal trainer and entrepreneur and advocate for women to feel safe and worthy in their bodies, and everything that I kind of do and create is sort of from that truth and roots.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, it was. I'm going to add some more credentials to Kami's name. So Kami, we've known for, I don't know how many years now? How many years, Nick?
I'm going on at least 9, maybe
I've
more.
been
Not
married
more.
for 10.
Yeah, Cam, not Nick. My
I'm
point is
sorry.
we've known Kami since college.
Like
We
15
both.
years. 9?
Come on, I thought math was one of your majors, dude.
Okay.
Because I've known her since 2009, fall of 2009. Yeah.
I guess that's right.
So yours would be
so we're going
2008.
on. That's right. So it's 15-ish. That's right.
Yeah. All right. Kami also introduced us.
Yes.
You're
Kami's the
welcome,
reason I
world.
have a wife.
So we thought this topic would be a really great one to cover, but also they both popped into our heads because we know them so well. And I don't know if we said this, but Kayla is actually Kami's mom.
I know, I did.
So-
I was wondering that. I was like, that's my mom.
So you guys must know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
Longer
So
than
it should
19
be.
years.
It's somewhat of a heavy topic, but I feel like it's fun to be on with y'all and to talk about this. And we've known you for so long, so it's kind of not an easy conversation to have, but you make it easy.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to it.
Okay, episode maintenance, before we get into today, that's actually relevant to today's episode, is Nick sent me a TikTok the other day that was about before the age of 7, kids don't have the ability to reason. It's super relevant because the example the guy gave was like, okay, this dad tells a daughter who's trying on a shirt, like, oh, that's a little tight, you look a little fat. That will then shape everything she does like the rest of her life without proper, I'd say, therapy to get through that. And so that's one of the reasons why we're talking about this. I mean, we have almost 2.5-year-olds. And so you could say that they're too young to understand, but we've already tried to edit ourselves from things like this or saying things like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was not to correct you, but if I remember,
Please do.
if I remember correctly, it was like, oh, your shirt's a little tight. It's making you look this way. So the point of the video was, we know as adults that saying that is not necessarily identifying the person as, the characteristic we're describing them as. In this case, it was larger or fat. But the child is not able at that age to reason at the same level and understand, oh, he's saying the shirt doesn't look good, as opposed to he's saying I don't look good. So Kayla and Kami, I'm sure you've both come across things like this, but it was relevant for today's episode because it's interesting to have to think when your child is that early about being careful about what you're saying.
If I can interject here, I was working on a novel and I was talking with therapists because it was about a girl coming out of foster care, but there was no sexual abuse because I didn't want to have to deal with it or write about it. And she said, I need a book for 3 to 8 year olds on body boundaries and sexual abuse prevention. And I'm going at 3, and she goes, yes, because at that point they can get an understanding, and children are groomed from a very early age, and 95%, 95 to 97% of the sexual abuse is caused by a known individual, whether it's family or friends. And so that's why the books, that the 4 that I have written, are for 3 to 8 year olds,
Wow.
because it's important. And again, it can be a heavy subject, but that's why my goal is that in all of my books, it's in a real sing song, rhythm rhyme poem that is empowering, that all say I or me, to give them the ability to internalize that I am, that my body's mine from
Yeah.
neck to knee.
Do you wanna read a portion of that right now? Just a little blippet so they can hear it?
Yes, I would love to. Yeah, I'd like to read 2 of them. The repeated refrain, and all of the pictures are very non scary or frightening. No perpetrator is mentioned, and it's again in the first person. So the repeated refrain is, my body's mine from neck to knee, and nobody's free to be touching me. From head to toe, my body's mine. I love my body, and it's all mine. Hugs are okay if I say so, but I am free to tell them no. Kiss my cheek might be okay, but only if I say you may. A safe grown up will never say, don't dare tell what we did today. And if they do, I'm going to yell, I'm going to run, I'm going to tell. So, with those 3 instances, with the first one, it's that empowering, but then the second one is being able to tell your child they have a right to say no. If someone, a lot of times, um, in one part of it, it says, a yucky feeling is good to know. My body's saying it's time to go. It's time to leave. Get out of there. Go tell someone you know will care. A lot of times, children can have a perception that we are not aware of. And we say, oh, Uncle Jim is fine. He's a sweet guy. Go hug him. Well, Uncle Jim is not fine, and the child knows it. So, teaching your children an alternative way of greeting, fist bump, high five, salute, or whatever, but never force a child to ever hug an adult. It embarrasses you. Get over it. It's about them.
Yeah, a lot of what you said, I know we have points in our outline to get into in detail, but if I could summarize, it kind of sounds like you're agreeing from the perspective of your research and work that it is important to pay attention to our words when speaking with our kids at that
Yes,
even that young of an age.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Cam, do you have anything you wanna say? I know you have opinions on that as well.
I always have opinions. Yeah, it made me think of the book that I'll reference later again, but one of the stats that they say is like by kindergarten, most kids believe fat is a bad word, and by middle school, more than a quarter of them have gone on a diet. And so it's interesting, like by kindergarten, 5 or 6, they already associate this like fat is bad. And as like, I'm very much so an advocate that like fat is not bad, being fat is not bad. And so when you have this dad say, oh, that's making you look fat or whatever, inherently, kind of like you were saying, Lauren, because our culture has a very clear perspective on what fat means, then she, without being able to discern, is going to internalize that as bad just because of our culture, because she can't reason that that doesn't define me. It's okay if I'm fat. I'm still so much more than what my body looks like. But I thought that was, I was like, by 5 or 6, they already know like this word is not something I want to be associated with. And that can just be something, like you said, Lo, that stays with you for a really long time.
Well, and I would say like we have been very aware of this since the twins were young because they have grown at different rates. And so it's not unusual for someone to ask me like what's their age difference because they think that one of them is older based on their size. And that happened, even when they were smaller, like under a year old. And so I was always very quick to correct that. Or, it depends. We have an episode called Please Do Not Say That to My Children. I believe it was episode 2. And we talk about like how we correct people. And, if like I'm just in passing with someone, I'm probably not going to correct. I may talk to the kids after the fact just to kind of like say like, hey, that wasn't okay, or that was a weird thing to say. But if it was a family member or something like that who we're going to see again, we gently remind like not to say things like that just because, the comparison is real.
One reminder here. We spoke about this on the episode with your sister, Lauren, Emma.
The gentle
how
parenting episode.
Yeah. So the assumption here is, of course, that all of us parents are not trying to say things that will hurt our children, right? The point here is to know, with the help of people like Kami and Kayla, what are some redirections we can have with our language and our intention to hopefully avoid things like them internalizing, oh, I don't look good always in this color. I don't look good because I'm a certain size or because I'm a certain weight. So the reminder here, and the really interesting stat that's never going to leave my head from Emma, is that doing it right about 30% of the time as a parent from a therapist perspective is the bar. So don't get mad at yourself if you catch yourself saying things that you may worry your child's going to internalize. We all are going to do that, and no one of us is going to be perfect in this pursuit of better language and better intention. So just give yourself a break before we go into the rest of this episode. That's my point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just not to correct you, but to be specific about it, it was like you can only get it right with your child 30% of the time and still have a good relationship with them was the stat.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it. Quite
Yeah.
humbling.
Yeah, for sure.
That's lower than I would have thought.
I know.
Wow.
Kayla, it looks like you have something to say.
Well, a couple of things. A friend of ours, we were all Zooming, and he was telling his grandchildren good night, and he goes, "Come here, Miss Piggy," and
Oof.
I just was like, and he goes, "Oh, because she just wolfs her food down." I didn't say anything in front of him or in front of the child, but I called him later, and I called him out on it. And I said, "You do." So I didn't correct him in front of everybody that was on the Zoom or anything, but I could not let that pass without
Yeah.
saying, "You don't mean it. You're not meaning to be mean. You think it's funny, and it's not." And he told me, he goes, "Okay, I'll never say that again." And I said, "Okay, Paul, you better not." So
Yeah, good for you. Good for you.
Okay, we were talking about how before the age of 7, there's no like ability to really reason. Well, I've been reading the 5 Principles of Parenting by Dr. Lisa Pressman, and something that she said that's not, just hers, but like scientific fact was in this book was that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until the ages of 18 to 30. So it's just a really long time, and that's like how we reason as well, and get through things. And so the fact that I don't know, just like being able to get through things, like it's no wonder the things that happen to us when we're younger affect us when we're older is because like we're not finished fully developing mentally until later. And so when you learn something that young, it shapes the rest, which it kind of just like supports everything we just talked about. But I think maybe I knew about that's how long it took to fully develop, but I just maybe forgot.
Yeah, that is like a much higher age. I just hit that just like a few years ago. Like my brain was done.
Yeah.
Just a few years ago. It's just wild that, you're constantly getting this input and you're constantly trying to make these decisions all the while. Like you're just not even fully finished, like forming in a way that is going to protect you the most and reason the most and all this kind of stuff. And, I think it's important to, like you said, to be like really gentle with ourselves in general, because that is just something that like it takes a long time to unlearn things, and like the culture does not make it easier to kind of navigate, especially these topics that we're talking about today. And that is just wild. That is much older than I would have ever thought.
Yeah, and a key part of that is like self-regulation. Again, we're not fully developed until later, which is important for learning boundaries. And so another thing that Dr. Pressman says is she goes into like boundaries versus limits. And just to define it before we get into today, boundaries are rules for yourself and are interpersonal between people. And limits are rules that refer to unacceptable behaviors. So as parents, it's our job to create and hold those boundaries and limits and hold them in an authoritative way.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's also funny in the book, she refers to herself as, like, her bad influence self and then her wise grandma self, which you wanna be like your wise grandma self with your boundaries. What were you gonna say, Caleb?
Well, two things. I had told my daughters, if I can't be a good example, then I'll end up being a horrible warning. So, you've got
Mm.
both spectrums there. So, but I was going to say, as far as the brain, Dr. Daniel Siegel he has done the flipping your lid, if you're familiar with that, where you can use it, that this is your prefrontal cortex. So, this is your thinking brain. This is when you can study and you can learn when you're doing that. When you flip your lid, then the learning ability goes away. And that's where the anger can come in. And you're not thinking with your prefrontal cortex, that you are just your lid is flipped. This is your amygdala, this is your brain stem, and then this is your limbic system. And this is where you can get into like your anger and your emotions. And then when you flip it, this is where you're in the fight, flight, or freeze. So when a child is uh, throwing a fit and throwing a temper, it's not that they're ignoring you, they can't hear you because they can't engage with their prefrontal cortex. And it's very much of a system. So that's where you learn the strategies for self regulation, which I've got one that's called I Can Do That, and that's on self regulation. But it's just really important to know that the actions of your children, when they are afraid or feared, you can have them, you're going, you're flipping your lid, so that they can then have that symbol and then you can reiterate with them of what they're doing.
That's really
Love that.
interesting. That,
Also go ahead,
pardon
Nick.
me. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say that when you said I have one, I know you're talking about your books, but I don't know if we talked about it. We have 2 of the 4. We have My Body's Mine, and then I'll Always Remember, and then you just said your other one is called I Can Do That, and then what's your other one called?
My actions matter. Because the I Can Do That, what talks about with children trying to, we expect children to be still. Being still is for the adult, it's not for the kid.
Mm.
So when we want them to be still, it's because we want them still. It's not because
Yeah.
they want to be still. In this one, it says, my body moves of its own will. And because when they can't be still, and it says, my feet will twitch, my arms will flap, my body wiggles, my fingers snap. So when I get all fidgety, it's time to think what works for me. And then I have in there that a list of things that they can do, because it says, when I get mad, it's hard to stop. I'll shake my fist and blow my top. And again, it's fun pictures that kids can relate to.
Yeah.
Um, and then it has like the different things that they can do. So it's really important to empower your children to. One of the main things to remember is that behavior displays a need. Meet the need and you change the behavior.
Yep.
So when your child is, having a trouble, whatever, find out what is it that they're looking, what is it they need? And then when you can meet that, then you can change their behavior. With the other book, it's called My Actions Matter. And that one is I speak with respect, I cause no hurts, I listen and obey. Because a lot of kids interacting with each other, um, like biting or kicking or hitting or whatever, that's one, with this book addresses that, because it says, please use your words and show respect, please listen and obey. We'll talk about a compromise, but I'm the boss today. So it talks about having redos and compromises, and how it's important to let the child in on that as well. And again, in body boundaries, it's that compromise, letting them know what what they can, again, on that greeting, that you don't have to hug, but we do need to acknowledge the other person. So, how would you like to give that? And then give them your two positives to choose from. Don't just,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to do this or that. Always give them the options. And again, I've always said, pick between your two positives for them to choose from.
Yeah. I love that.
You don't have to ask us anymore, Kayla. I think we are happy with you moving in and helping us to raise our kids based on what you just said. So thank you for offering. This is going to be great. We can all live life together.
Well,
Yeah.
I will say, Nick, that when my husband and I, we were speaking to young parents and we're talking about it. And before we did, I asked both of the girls, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And what do you wish we had done differently? And they gave me so much grace. I was like, whew, okay, they don't remember the bad things that I felt like I did. And they turned out pretty good, I will say.
I agree.
They're pretty
Yeah.
great. Yeah, they are great. Yeah, I like the intent of all four of those books, by the way. I think it's
And you
beautiful
say,
that you made them.
I was gonna say, you say it's 3 to 8, but I think we bought them for the twins like at 1.5 almost or something. And so like I don't think it's ever too early to read it to them. So I think before 3. But yeah.
Well, the counselors that I have worked with, they have used them with teenagers. And what they will say is that I've got this young person that I'm working with. Would you read this and tell me what you think about it? What do you
Mm.
like about it? What do you think? And so it gets them into, oh, I didn't think about that. And they have had kids talk about sexual abuse for the first time reading the book because it gave them a safe space to say,
So good.
yeah, I don't deserve that, that my body is mine.
I mean, Cami, I'm curious. I think I know the answer here, but I want to hear you say it. Like, you work mostly with adult women, right? I'm curious if, based on your understanding of what's in Kayla's books, if they would also help the adult women that you work with, right? Of course, they're written directed towards younger children, but the concepts I feel like resonate, Kayla, to your point, past the age range that you have dictated there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, as women, we're really like shifting a narrative of having like more autonomy over our bodies and over like how we are allowed to show up and take up space. And I think being given permission to like tell a man, an adult man who like wants to give me a hug, to say hi, and being like, hi instead. And like that is fully allowed to me. I
Mm-hmm.
think giving kids permission really young will make it much easier for that, child as an adult to set that boundary, versus like an adult learning now that they have that autonomy to say like, I don't want to hug you. Like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. And I think that is, I think a lot of these principles, because they aren't as commonly taught and like instilled in families and schools and those types of things. I think that a lot of adults just missed out on the teachings of them. And so I
Yeah.
think it still like very much so applies to everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
one of the things too is that when a child has had trauma, in order to heal that trauma, they have to go back to the age in which the trauma occurred.
Mm.
So I have a nephew that is in his 40s, but when he was 9, he walked in on a burglar who took him and threw him against the fireplace and knocked him out. And that has colored how he has dealt with it. And I was talking to him, I says, he needs to let that little 9-year-old boy cry. So it has to be, so when women are talking about this, if they, sexual abuse or whatever the situation is, they've got to go back to the age in which the trauma occurred.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like, I hear you, Cami, say that these words resonate with adults and the principles resonate with adults, but it almost sounds as well, to your point, Kayla, like if we have someone who has some level of trauma that could be addressed by the concepts in these books, we kind of may need them to hear it through the lens of writing for a 3 to 8 year old, as opposed to the lens
Mhm.
of however old they may be as an adult.
Correct, correct. And that's why it's so important that when, like, with women that are dealing with body issues and different things that I have been told when I was little that carried with me through, for years until I really realized it. But that's where it's so important to, especially like in the body's mind, in the back of it is the parent guide. All of the books have a parent guide in the back, and it tells them it's not an easy subject to talk about. When you think, oh, I got to talk about sexual abuse. And the kick is, you don't have to know anything. You just have to be willing to talk. And by taking the book and then following, reading the back matter in it, which is very simple and very understandable, it has questions and activities that you can do to help stimulate the conversation. Because within anything with your children, you need to be able to display what the behavior you want to see in them. So if
Yeah,
you want them to
modeling
say,
it.
I'm sorry, yes, you've got to model it. And so you say, that's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to find out and I'm going to tell you. So that gives them the confidence. They are heard, they're seen, heard, and they're believed. And then you go and then you follow through. Then you follow through with it.
So, wow, that was already so good, and we haven't even gotten to the bulk of the episode. So good, you guys. Thank you. But
And we're done.
But kind of that leads us into like my first question I wanted to ask both of you. And the question is, what does body positivity mean to you? And I wanted to ask both of you because you're both body positive in different ways. Just one of you talks more about what you should talk about, and the other one talks more about what you shouldn't talk about. Kami, I know you have like what you should do as well, but I think that's the easiest ways to kind of like um, describe it. So maybe Kami, you want to go first? What does body positivity mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have a slightly more clinical is not the right word, but just like with my work, body positivity is sort of a movement created to help women, especially marginalized women, give them permission to love their bodies, see their bodies, celebrate their bodies. And I think everybody deserves to like love their bodies. It's a very hard thing to do in our culture, but being body positive is kind of just the belief that you deserve to love the physical shape that you show up in. And that's kind of what it resonates with me for.
What about you, Kayla?
Agreed. And, with children, it's kind of thinking of that, saying things that are beyond the physical and, from the help. Kami had been saying this, and I've taken it on as you are smart, you are kind, and you are important. We've got to remember those are three things that have nothing to do with how you look. And with children, like we had mentioned before, is that they internalize all the words the adults said, and 90% of the time, if it's negative, they're going to take it 100% of the time. If it's positive, you've got to reinforce it. Like, I think it's 5 times as many times you have to say
Wow.
something positive for one negative, because they're going to take that negative because of fear and everything else. So again, talking with children about empowering them over the control of their body, and then helping them learn how to self-regulate is extremely important, because they're, like you had mentioned before, our prefrontal cortex, it's not developed until we're 18 to 30. And so you've got to be able to give those children the tools to be able to help them.
It kind of feels to me like some fully developed prefrontal cortex adults need to hear the positive thing a lot more than they need to hear the negative thing,
One of the things when you're working with children, or when you're working with anyone truly, is that you have to be self-regulated first.
Yeah.
You cannot regulate someone when you are dysregulated.
We've talked about that in the sense of like it's your job as a parent or as the adult or whatever to be the calmest person in the room. And when we talked about gentle parenting with my sister, who is a therapist, she was saying like people are kids and kids are people, and that a lot of the things she learns with working with kids she applies to adults, because it's the same. And a lot of adults haven't experienced what we're learning now, that really people really need to be spoken to and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And something,
Absolutely.
Kami, pardon me. Go ahead, Kayla.
No, I was going to say that it's so important to realize is that we all have that child within us. And so we always have to be nurturing that child. And so that's really important is that, like you said, the adult has to be the one that is regulated that's in the room. And they're the ones. And so when you can look at yourself and say, children, I need a timeout. I need a time in instead of saying timeout. I need a time in over here. And because mommy needs just to kind of regulate herself. So then you put yourself into time in or
Yeah.
time out, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
The that little pause you had was just so well placed. It was like added the right amount of weight to we all have that kid inside of us, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That was
Mm-hmm.
pretty. Kami, something I did not react to that you said. I'm curious if you would validate this. It almost sounds like you are uniquely positioned in your work with adults and specifically adult women to like tell them what is not okay to say to them to themselves, what you don't think is okay for people to say to them. So like because they're able to reason and they won't only internalize that negative, they can hear you saying like, hey, don't speak negatively to yourself, whereas you would want to say that differently to a child and reinforce the positive a little more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I think as a kid, you're like having so much, I mean, both, all ages are having a lot just like put upon us verbally. But I think as adults, we have a lot stronger narrative, a lot more of those like pathways built of ways that we think about ourselves and believe about ourselves. And I think kind of like my mom was saying, it's, when it comes to being body positive, like the reality is like the body positive movement, it's a blanket statement, is about like loving and celebrating your body. But there are
Yeah.
faults within it because that is a very challenging and difficult thing. And a lot of people don't want to be boiled down to like what their body looks like. And so having value outside of that you're smart or you're kind or you're brave, all of those things are really important to emphasize. And then to your point on the negatives, to challenge those things that people say and ask them, why do you think that? Where do you think that came from? Who told you that? And going back, like my mom was saying earlier, to that childhood place where it's like, oh, well, so-and-so said this to me, and that's just like how I feel about myself now, and that's something you really have to like uncover and dig out. And if you don't, then it just stays with you and it kind of drives you without you realizing it.
Cami,
Yeah.
you've witnessed me do this to Nick. Whenever he says something like self-deprecating, usually covered in humor because that's his style, make him say 3 things he likes about himself, just to kind of negate that one. I was like, say it. Say 3 things. And if he can't do it, I'm like, well, I like this about you. And I mean, I think you need to be, not you, but collective you, like be that person. Like he knows not to say things about himself in front of Cami because she will tell him to stop. I mean, I do too, but it's different.
Yeah, people have learned. They're like, oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. I take it back. I'm so sorry. I'm like, good. If that is the behavior that I am shifting, I'm into it. That's
Yeah.
fine.
There's a Instagram, like, not a carousel. There we go. Wasn't a reel. I'm like using my finger if you're watching on a video. That I'll put in the show notes of just like how to talk to your kids about their bodies. And it's don't. And it's not to be taken in a literal sense, don't, because obviously you need to talk to them about their bodies, but just like about the physical appearance and like things like that. And so it's just really interesting. It made me think of also, Cami, I know you read it, the I'm Glad My Mom Died.
Yeah.
Definitely trigger warning for that book about Jeanette McCurdy and her mother, but just like
Yeah.
how much her mother shaped her for the worse, rather, in regard to her body.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
But
agree. I think there's like never a good time to comment on someone's body. Just like period. You have
yeah,
no idea what you're reinforcing. You have no idea what you're triggering. I mean, and we're trained to feel good when someone's like, "Ooh, have you lost weight?" or like, "You look so pretty," Like as women, we're kind of told these are like the best things you can be told about yourself. And so when people don't say that, it can be hard to feel that. But I just think, yeah, like limiting extensively commenting on people's bodies ever in general is just always the safest route to go. It's a very like, I don't want to say lazy compliment, but it's a very lazy way to like compliment somebody.
Speaking of our bodies, something we love putting on our bodies are products from Permanently Pure. We use their deodorant, we use their body butter, we use their face soap. So many good things. You can try it for yourself with code
BGMAD.
and get a discount on every single order every time you purchase. Try it out and let us know what you think.
Go do it. Oh yeah. Kami, that's a great point about compliments. I'm curious. So I don't know where I've heard this, but I'm curious if really the three of you guys would agree with this. So I have heard that I've heard it recommended that you should not say thank you for things that are assigned to your appearance unless they're actually a compliment. So for example, to your point, Kami, if people say to me, "Oh wow, like you've lost weight." If I say thank you to that, I'm assigning positivity to the fact that I weigh less, right? So instead of saying thank you, I would say, oh, yeah, I've been working out, or like, yes, I've been doing this, or oh, interesting, or something that's not thank you. Not that you don't appreciate it, but just they're not complimenting you, right? You don't want to assign power to the thing that really shouldn't have power. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you might have been working out, but you also could be sick.
Sure, that's a good point.
And so I think again, weight loss, our culture feels like weight loss will always be a positive compliment because losing weight 9.9 times out of 10 is always the thing that we're told to strive for. Very rarely will somebody go, wow, you look like you've gained weight. Congrats. Unless they know that like actively this person is trying to jump a weight class or something like that. Like that's just not how we do it. And so I think when somebody's like, oh, you've lost weight, again, it's like this compliment, like you have no idea what they're going through. They could be working out, making different lifestyle changes, and then their body just like naturally lost weight, and that's where their body wants to be. They also could have been working out and not lost weight, and now they don't get credit for that behavior change because they didn't lose weight. Well, that's not a fair way to couple those together. So I like that where you're not inherently saying thank you because that puts it in the context of like, this is always a positive when it's just not.
Yeah, the other side of that too is like being careful to use your thank you when you have actually heard a compliment, right? So like instead of, oh, you've lost weight, if somebody says like, regardless of whether it's close to that statement, if somebody says, oh, you're beautiful, or oh, like you look strong, or something that is an actual positive attribute, then you use your thank you as opposed to assigning the thank you to a physical attribute.
It feels like it's more of a protection for yourself, like not necessarily for the other person, but just so your mental
Right,
health
exactly.
can be like, okay, this isn't part of me
Not
or the most
attached.
important part of me. It also reminds me, Kami, was it you that you were at an event and you said like, I like your dress, like, and the girl was like, I don't talk about what I'm wearing, like as a small talk.
Yeah. Your memory, man. That was back in Austin, so a long time ago. And yeah, I think I was like, oh my gosh, I love your dress or whatever. And she immediately was just like, wouldn't tell me where it was from, wouldn't talk to me about it, wasn't gonna do it, which is a very like intense. I was like, oh, this is the personality. But like, I get that one, lazy compliment on my part to open the door by having to compliment something she's wearing, and valid on hers that like, is there anything else you want to talk about besides what I'm wearing? So I think it's getting people comfortable with like digging in a little bit, looking for something a little more special, unique, spending more time around it versus just like what is the easiest go-to. And it's okay to tell someone that they're pretty. Like you don't want to, like you're allowed to think people are pretty, but it's just that when that's always the way that we tell people they have value, that's when I think it starts to lose its power.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move into like our first chunk.
It's hilarious. We're going to be here for like 5 hours.
No, we'll promise we'll stop. Okay, we have this divided. I know it feels like we've already dove dived in.
That's right, dove.
But we actually have 2 sections today. So we're going to talk about body safety first, and then we're going to go into body image and body positivity. And if you are a regular, then you probably noticed we skipped our TIFF. We just thought we were just already in it and we're skipping it. We'll be back with a TIFF next week, so don't you worry. My first question for you, Kayla, is you wrote this book later in life. Did you implement this book's teaching with your girls? And if not, what would you do differently raising your girls in today's day and age?
Kami could probably answer this better than I can. But I do not feel like I did a good job on that because I didn't have resources. Is it, and that's an excuse. I mean, I certainly there were out there, and um, I think that I parented a lot more from fear as opposed to from really education. And it's been real eye opening working with the therapists through all of these different, because the books were all like trauma informed, and every word of the books are written with therapist approval. So when I write something and they're going, oh no, you missed the mark on that, it needs to say yada yada. And so every word is very, very intentional in there. But I wish I had have been, and I fully intend to with my sweet grandson. And it's just making it to where it growing up in the 50s and 60s, it was more of a taboo. You don't talk about it. You don't say anything about it. And it was never brought, I was never taught about it. And so I didn't know how to. And that's what I really appreciate now is that there's so much available, and the parent really needs to be very discerning on the product that they're using for their children to educate them. So I do wish I had done better. And yeah, sorry, Kami.
So let me ask a question here. So Cami, how does it feel hearing your mom say that, and what is your view of how you were brought up versus the clear work that that your mom is doing to help train others to be better in this area?
Yeah, Mom, you did an amazing job.
Thank you.
That's what I wanted you to say. There it is.
Thank you.
Woo! I passed the test. Yeah, I feel like you don't know what you don't know. As my dad always says, it was a different time. And I think there's just lots of the thing that I appreciate now is like, because we do know stuff, you behave differently. And you are an advocate so that more kids can be raised with more information, more parents can parent with more information. And I think, to hold it against yourself that you didn't do it differently when you didn't know differently is just not fair. Now you know differently, you do differently. And I appreciate that we're able to actually like have an open adult dialogue around things now. Like now that I'm in therapy and I'm revisiting things that did cause little T traumas in my life, and I'm kind of trying to uncover why I feel certain things, like you're very open and receptive. And yeah, it's like I didn't know, I did the best that I could, and here's my thoughts so that you can gain perspective. And I think that that's all you can ask of anybody, who's being a parent and doing their best. We're on a podcast together. If I was very resentful, I'd be like, no, about
Yeah.
parents.
And I know that you feel that way about your mom. I think that's what I wanted you to say it mainly for her. Cause it's honestly, Kayla, like it's very respectable to see a parent who just thinks, oh, I'm not sure if I did this in a way that I should have done it. But not only are you doing that internal work, like you've created collateral and assets for other families and many other children to use so they're not in that situation in the future, hopefully. So, I mean, big kudos to you. Also, Cami, you brought up your dad, just like your mom. Your dad is an excellent human as well. So shout out to him.
Shout out to Papa John. We love him.
Papa John.
How did it feel whenever you heard her say she called someone to say, don't say that to the child about like their appearance and how they ate?
I was really proud of her. I think it's scary to challenge someone. It's scary to challenge men on things like that. And I think I was really proud of her for trusting that, like, that's not okay. And I'm going to advocate for the little girl that is going to be impacted by this. He's an adult. He'll be okay. But, like, we're going to make sure that she has a different experience and a different interaction with him moving forward, hopefully. And so, yeah, I was very proud of her. I was like, woo, go mom. That's a big,
Well,
big deal.
thank you, sweetheart. And one of the reasons I did not defend you in several situations that I should have, because I let my own personal fears of the men that were in authority, and I did not protect you like I should have. And I apologize for that. But because we have talked about it and we've worked through it, I was not going to let that be perpetrated again. And so, because of your openness and willingness to talk about it and share it with me, then that girl got the benefit of your unfortunate experience. Let me just put it that way. So,
Wow.
Y'all are making me cry. Come on now.
I know. I'm like,
Gosh.
therapy right
yeah.
Whew. All right.
Yeah.
Any other
So we
comments
just
on
have to
that one?
keep talking now after that, right?
now.
That's
I know, right?
we're just gonna be fine now. Gosh, you're so cool, Kayla.
Well,
Okay. Next question, Kayla.
yes, ma'am.
And okay. Did you allow your girls to have sleepovers back then? And then in today's day and age, would you allow them to have sleepovers now?
Yes, but only with, I remember
This is
one
yes to back
time,
then you did?
yes,
Okay.
yes, with the caveat of only with women that are with families that I knew and or had talked with the parent. I remember calling one mother because Kami was going to spend the night with her girlfriend and I didn't know them. And so I called the mother and we talked for quite a while. And she said, wow, you're the first mom to call to see it, about her daughter, coming and spending the night. Because even like with babysitters, I always had um, young women that I never had teens or anything watch the girls. It was always younger women that college age or, whatever that, watch the girls. And so it's, yeah. But then, you have to be so careful because even with knowing the family, predators, their whole goal is to suck the parent in. Once they have the parent's approval and trust and validity, then they can perpetrate whatever they want on the child. Because the parent has already bought into, honey, no, you're imagining that couldn't say that. And that's why in there it says a yucky feeling. The book My Body's Mine is also in Spanish, and I went
Mi
around and
cuerpo
around and
es
around.
mío.
Yeah, sí, muy bien. That's the end of my Spanish. But the word yucky, we really went around and around because it's such an innate, oh, that doesn't feel right type feeling. And when a child goes to a house, if they are spending the night and then they have to, really understand that they can call you at any moment, any time while they're gone and saying, come pick me up. So the answer is yes, but it was always with knowing the family. And even then you have to listen to your child on what their experience was
So if
with
you
that.
were raising them today, would you allow them to have sleepovers today?
Again, it would have to be where I would know the family
Okay.
well.
So you do it the same
I
way?
would have them spend the house have it at our house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cam, do you have any thoughts on that? Would you allow sleepovers? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's, I think there's a fine line between, like, everyone's a predator and also no one and everyone is safe. I think making sure that your kids feel like they can call you, come home. They have a cell phone by that point if they're staying the night, so that they don't have to go to the parent individual to ask for permission, I think would probably be important to me. Obviously, I trust myself and Tej, so similar to mom, is like, you can stay at our house always. But yeah, and I hated spending the night as a kid. I called so many times. I was like, come get me. I hate this. So I was also just like not probably the typical
So you said a
sleepover.
cell phone. What it would be there? Would there be an age minimum to allowing sleepovers?
Well, I mean, because with the girls, I had always said that my children, they're not going to have a phone in their room, which that's what it was on the wall. They're not going to have a phone in the room,
Yeah.
and they're not going to have a TV in their room, because I don't want their room to be a place that is has everything they want to go to. I want them to go out of the room, and so they did not have a phone until they were in a ninth grade, and that was when they were going to be gone, and driving, and and everything. So I wanted to have that. Um, I wanted them to have that access to where they could get a hold of me. Now kids get it in like second or third grade, so it's it's
I
hard.
would say it's a different time as far as like when kids are getting cell phones and they have the cell phones that have the different capabilities to where all you can do is call. But um,
Mhm.
we had sleepovers, my sister and I did. But I think there's only two friends I can think of who I ever like would spend the night at their house, and my parents knew their parents well. And there was also a rule, like if they had an older brother or something, there was something about that. Like we weren't
Mhm.
necessarily allowed, like whether they were going to be there or not, just because I think the hesitation and like I don't know where we stand with sleepovers yet, but I think the hesitation is like you can trust the kid, but then also not necessarily trust the parent, whether they're like, um, are the parents going to be drunk when your child's there? Like, what if something happens to where like they have to or should be in the state to take care of the kid but can't because they are impaired in another way? You just never know what's going to happen, and it's not always the adult. Sometimes it's the other kid. We've talked about before about like a child is the age mentally that the oldest kid is in their house. So if like, sure, Cypress and Olive have another friend who's a 2.5-year-old, if they have an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old sibling, like everything they're learning is now like trickling down. Kind of like if none of us experienced this because we're all older children, but like, my sister for sure had friends who had sisters older than me who like knew all like this is gonna sound like, oh, but like MTV and like song lyrics and things like that. You just are introduced earlier to it, and so it's not always necessarily about trusting the kid. And from my perspective, it's more so like the surroundings and environment, because we also weren't allowed to ride in the car with people who my parents didn't know, which like that terrifies me, having Cypress and Olive ride in the car with somebody else. But yeah.
It seems to me that if you're using tools like Kayla, the books that you've written or others that are available, and you have that open line of trust and communication with your children, hopefully that's one of the ways you can sense, is there even a yellow, if not a red flag here with them
Mhm.
staying somewhere? And that's, of course, considering whatever standards and boundaries you may have with, I need to know the family or I need to know the parents before my child's able to stay. But just it's what I'm trying to say is I could see it being a different level of comfort if you trust that your child will come to you and tell you if they have seen or sensed something off, as opposed to if you don't have that open line and trust with them that you've hopefully started to instill at a young age. That would be more difficult, and you're kind of leaning on your own understanding of people you really don't know very well.
Right. And another thing is that I don't know if you've heard of the engine plate. This again is a tool,
Hmm.
and it is so a kid, a lot of times they don't have the words to express some of their feelings. And so this is where you have blue is I'm running slow, green is I'm good to go, red is I need to stop. So when so you and it's like on a plate, and then you can put a little spinner so they can move it wherever they want. But that gives them the opportunity to put it onto a blue, and you're going, yeah, and they don't have to come and tell you you can see it's on blue, and then you can initiate the conversation to where, well, did something happen to make you feel that way? Or, are you, red means I'm angry and I'm, upset and stuff. So there's tools that you can use so that you can help your child talk with you without having to start for them to start the conversation, but they can still bring it up.
I've also seen parents like regularly will use like a big poster that has like different faces on it, like happy, sad, scared, all that, and they
Yes.
go through that like every single night into like how they're feeling. So they're already kind of used to like talking about how they're feeling. I keep thinking about, we haven't watched it yet. I don't know if we're gonna watch it, but I keep thinking about, what's it called? The Dan Schneider documentary that's
I
out.
know. I knew that's what you're gonna say. Yeah.
About, because just looking at it now, they did have a cry for help, and you're right, it was the parents getting involved and like, saying like, okay, yeah, they're going to go over to this person's house, and I just want to throw up. But I have a TikTok that I'll put in the show notes also that references what you said, Kayla, about sleepovers and how monsters don't look like monsters. They just
Right.
don't, and most of the time they don't in any of these like capital T trauma senses.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And that's the one thing, is to make sure that children understand, is like you said, when if you put a policeman up there, and you put a nurse up there, you put a teacher up there, you put a preacher up there, you put a sports guy, and you go, okay, which one's the perpetrator? Can be any of them, because they are not identifiable by their looks. And that's why they have to learn grooming techniques, so that they understand when they hear, um, there was one word that it was like, and I'll have to think of it, but it was, that you have to really help your children understand the verbiage that predators use. And Cami, to your point, not everybody's a predator. Not everybody is unsafe. That's there. There's more good than there is evil out there. But there's plenty out there to really keep you on your toes.
I think it's a worthy tool, though, um, for people to know, like, just visual perception is not enough to know somebody is safe. So to your point, like, Kayla, it's not that we have to wait until we see somebody who's obviously a monster or a perpetrator to know to stay away from them. It's, we need to recognize that, to your point, anyone who looks like anyone, who sounds like anyone, could be. So we just need to be as aware and as perceptive and use the tools we have at our disposal, whether we're kids or adults, just to always be paying attention to that, and don't let yourself get
Be
so
vigilant.
comfortable. Yeah, be vigilant. Don't let yourself get so comfortable simply because someone looks put together or looks safe.
Mhm.
Right, because there's the felt safety is so important, that it is, a child can feel in their home that is dysfunctional. They can have felt safety because that's what they're comfortable with. They can go to a house to where the mother's vigilant and she is on top of things and everything's great, and they can feel unsafe because it's not familiar with them, even though that is the a better place for them to be. So you have to really, really realize the felt safety of the child. And again, that's where I go back to, listen to the child's intuition, listen to them.
Yeah.
I think back to like how we talked about shyness and how like that's kind of seen as a societal like issue with kids, but really they're just feeling their surroundings out. You don't
Hmm.
want to not encourage. What's the better way to say that? You want to encourage them to keep listening to themselves. Like if they don't want to go like play with all the other kids, let them be with you until they feel comfortable. Then you are their safe space. Because if you just push them,
Right,
like you're not saying like I'm a safe space for you or listen to your body. You're saying just do it.
right, right. And that's really important, is that you don't put your feelings ahead of theirs, because you got to, like you said, listening to what they're, if they don't want to play with the children, then fine. Although they're going, because I had, two different issues. Because Cami already mentioned that she didn't like to spend the night any place, and I had, an individual that just berated me because I didn't make her spend the night any place. and
Oof.
with friends or anything else, because they thought that she should be able to be doing that. But I talked with a mother at camp, and I had expressed my concern about Cami not, she was in high school and was always wanting to be at home. She wanted to be home. And I was just wanted her to be able to be free and be, to feel comfortable, whatever. And then this mom said, she goes, it's fine. When she's ready to go, she's going to go. And you just need to realize that she will branch out and will go places. So appreciate while you got her. And I'm going, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And because I never pushed her.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like what you, Cami, said earlier in this discussion about, it's okay if you don't want to hug somebody. It's okay if you want to shake hands instead of hug. It's okay if, you don't want to approach everyone in the room the same way that uh, people who may be perceived as more comfortable would like to. Like, there's nothing, to your point, Lauren, wrong with what we currently call shyness. It's really just, if you're uncomfortable, that's okay. There's nothing that says you have to be the hugger or the toucher or the whatever in the room, right, Cam?
Yeah, I think there's not a right or wrong to it. And I have told my mom many times how much I appreciate not being forced into those scenarios, especially the ones she's referencing, because it just that wasn't something I was interested in doing. And I now live in LA. I've moved states away. I clearly am very comfortable spending the night away from my parents,
Darn.
But it's, this concept that this other parent believed that their way was the correct way and their way was the right way. And they were going to try to force my mom into that because they just had the full belief that the way I do it is correct. And I think that I'm not their child and they are not my parent. They don't get to decide what's best for me. And so I think having another parent advocate for my mom, you don't have to listen to them. That is not the end all be all of the right way to parent your child. And I think that was really good insight. And I got to go on trips with my dad as a result. And it was such a special time for me that I wouldn't have gotten had I decided to go to some of these camps and things like that.
Just a comment in your defense, Kayla, against whoever this other person was. Criticizing another parent for their kid not wanting to sleep over is just wild to me. I don't understand that at all. So I'm happy that somebody
You don't know
defended.
women well, Nick, then.
I don't get it. It's I don't understand.
Well, what I can say, my advice to y'all as young parents is that, do not be influenced by what criticism someone else gives you. That because I allowed my fear and concern of perception of me influence how I parented, and it was wrong, and I mightily regret. So, but I can see now that it's okay, now I can really advocate for the strength of saying, don't do as I did, so.
I hear you, but in the situation we just described, it sounded like you already had that strength and we're on that path. So don't be too hard on yourself here.
I also feel like that's also a testament to you and the home you created, Kayla, that Cami would want to be there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very sure.
Thank you. Yes. I'm ready for her to come back to Texas, but
Yeah.
No. Well, now that you're moving out here to help us raise the twins, we don't have to worry about that. That's so sweet of you.
There you go.
I think what I was going to say is that saying you feel like you didn't do a good job. I feel like if a parent at the end of the day says no, I think I did it perfectly or whatever, then they're probably missing some things because I think I don't know, it's very telling to be able to say yeah, you can have done your best and done the best you could with what you knew at that time and still want something to be different or have reacted differently.
Yeah, we've said before the phrase bad parents don't wonder at the end of the day if they've been bad parents, so just the fact of being in retrospection and trying to identify where you can improve makes you an excellent parent, even when your child's an adult.
Yeah. My sister's in DC right now at I wish I could remember what it's called. It's a therapist convention of sorts, and I forget who she is. I will find out and put it in the show notes. But she was just listening to a talk by the woman who said like good moms have scary thoughts or something along those lines, because you're just like constantly trying to think of like the best case scenario. The other thing she said to tell you, Nick, is that she's in a discussion right now about the book we talked about with her, the Children of Emotionally Unintelligent Parents, or whatever that one is. I probably butchered it, but she was in a room right now with that speaker who wrote that book.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Interesting.
Talking about how, Kayla, you said that they never had like TVs or computers in their room because you wanted them to be out with you. Another thing, like I didn't have that either. I know, Nick, you had a TV in your room. I did not have a TV. I did not have a computer. We did have our phones in our room, which my mom said she would do that differently once we had cell phones. But any thoughts or tips for like online prevention? Because I know like sexual predators are rampant out there. So it could be on a phone, it could be on a computer, just any thoughts in general.
I think that there are safeguards that are offered through different platforms and that a parent should lock it down. They and but do that with the caveat of talking with your child and discussing it and getting their feelings and their thoughts, because you don't want them to feel alienated, because everybody, oh, did you see that TikTok? Did you see that yada yada? And then they're going to feel left out. So it's finding that balance of what, because again, the discernment you're trying to teach them. And I have heard that by age 10, you've taught basically the kid everything you can teach them. From that point on, it's reinforcing what you've taught. I know that's really
That
scary.
is terrifying.
It's horrible, I know. But it's
10?
that, but that's why it's important to have that open communication. That's the one thing that with the girls that I was always wanted to be open, is that I'm not going to get mad. We're going to talk about it. I may get upset, but I just think that you really need to be engaged. You need to be very engaged on what's going on, but it's got to be with an open conversation with your child so that they do not then feel ostracized from their friends,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so I work in technology, for people who don't know. I know everybody on this call knows this, but there's something we talk about when we think of ways to access your technology and the internet. So the analogy that we haven't talked about this specifically, Lauren, but this is in my brain in prep for how we want to introduce devices to our children. Um, Devices like phones, iPads, computers, TVs, the ones you listed, are tools, the same way that a hammer or a wrench is a tool, and they can be used
mhm,
to build and create beautiful things and lift people up, and they can be used to hurt people and tear them down as well. So I would like the perception, with the correct safeguards, to your point, Kayla, that parents can implement. I would like our kids to have the perception of devices as tools that they can and should use for good. And I think,
mhm.
Kami, this probably goes into ways that you have coached your client to communicate non-verbally, right? So privately, in text messages and Instagram comments and TikTok comments and stuff, in a positive and reinforcing manner, because we as adults can obviously use these technology tools in a destructive manner if we're not careful as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things, kind of going back, we all are saying with the kids, it's like you can put all the safeguards on their phone that you control, but you can't control
Right.
their friends' phones.
Yeah.
So it's important, again, to be having this dialogue always and making sure that they feel comfortable and open. But from a social media perspective and from a technology perspective, like we're in control of what we ingest for the most part. Like you are in control of like who you follow and how you engage. And I think when people are commenting, like the thing that always comes to mind is like hurt people. And so when people are
Mhm.
hateful, when people are cruel, like it's none of us would go and write something hurtful on someone else's profile. And I remind myself of that frequently, is the sense of like I wouldn't. And it's because of how I feel about myself and my circumstances, but not everybody else has that. And so when someone is responding in that way, they're usually coming from a clearly dysregulated, hurt, kind of space. And so, yeah, I think it can be a really scary place for kids because like a lot of kids are hurting and a lot of kids don't know how to process that, cope with that. And they're just trying to not be the one that's targeted, you know? So it's easier to deflect and say the joke first or pick on the person first as long as it's not them. And I think that's, again, where it comes back to having like parents and people in their lives that build them up so that that doesn't have to be so, I don't know, it can be so destructive and so sad.
Yeah, I feel like the tools that we're referencing that can actually filter content and stuff for kids that are intended typically for kids, they're also, to your point, Kami, things that we can kind of be doing for ourselves. So like, true or false, Kami, I imagine you tell your clients to avoid things that are cutting them down and reinforcing a negative narrative about their appearance and their love for themselves and their bodies, right?
Yeah. I have so many people I don't follow. I have likes muted, so many comments. Yeah, anything that's going to potentially trigger you, I think being able to like remove that from your space, at least for a while, can be really helpful.
Yeah. Last point on this. I mean, that Kayla, to
I
your
have
point
points
about,
to give, so
I'm
you
sorry.
finish yours, and then I will
meant-
go. I'm like over here.
hold on. I meant my last point on this because I
Okay,
know I've
all right.
taken a lot of air. The tools you referenced, Kayla, I mean, we can turn on and off specific websites and content. That's called content filtering. Kami, that's the same thing you just said you recommend people do for themselves, right? So the, constant use and reassurance that we're using these tools for good and absorbing the things that are good within them as well. Hey, Lauren, do you have any points to add?
I have a lot. Hopefully I can remember them all. I think going back to like, we don't know what are on their kids' friends' phones. Sleepovers. Oh my gosh. Are their parents home? Do they have unfiltered access to the internet? Like, what does that look like? Because, I know my parents set boundaries of like what we were and we're not allowed to watch. And like, I, upheld those boundaries of like, yeah, no, I can't watch, I don't know, Rugrats or something like that, silly, but just like instilling in the boundaries and then letting them know that boundaries are for good. And then to your point, Nick, about these are tools, but they're also our tools. I've heard that a way that like people describe it to their kids is like, I'm letting you use the cell phone. It's mine. That means I have full access to everything. Also, don't put in writing anything you would be embarrassed if I saw. My mom always said that. Really, you shouldn't be doing that for your own good, because like just to be a nice person, but also like if I were to see that, would you be embarrassed? And I think that like helps you filter yourself. There is a TikTok account. It's like the Beekeeper or something like that. And he talks about a program that like basically filters through everything, because obviously you can have like your YouTube filters and things like that, but things get through. And there is something, I'll try to at least find his account if I can't find out what the program is, that basically filters through everything for you and sets a red alert like with this website being used or this word was used on a text or something like that, just to kind of like be your eyes in all the places, because you can't be, especially online. Oh, slow down, sorry. I thought I had to get it all in. I didn't know if you were just gonna be like let me talk. Okay. Yeah. And that is the closing for part 1 of this 2-part series. We had such a good conversation. We had to snip it here so the ears don't bleed. And we will see you next week with part 2 of episode 37. Well, actually, that will be 38 on your kids and their bodies, body safety, and body image.
Yeah, thanks for being here and growing with us.
Boy, girl, mom, dad. Gotta wash those butts together. It's a trip, but we'll guide you through with tips and tricks for boys and girls too.